I almost didn't attend that Christmas dinner. At 71, I'd reached the age where I no longer felt obligated to sit through uncomfortable traditions. But my son insisted. He said the grandchildren would be there, everyone would be together, and it would mean a lot to the family. So I went. For 9 years, my daughter-in-law, Melissa, had treated me like background furniture. Not cruelly. That would have been easier to address. Instead, she specialized in omission. She would greet everyone in a room before eventually noticing me. Family plans were discussed in front of me, but rarely with me. Conversations flowed around me as though I occupied a different frequency. I learned to stop expecting anything different. What made it strange was that I had never given her a reason to dislike me. I was simply uninteresting. At least that's what I eventually concluded. The truth was that most of my life existed outside the family's field of vision. After my husband died years earlier, I buried myself in work. I helped build a technology company from a struggling startup into a successful international business. I served on boards. I invested carefully. I traveled often. I never hid any of it. People just rarely asked. And I wasn't the type to volunteer achievements during family dinners. By Christmas, I was semi-retired and perfectly content with my life. That evening felt familiar from the moment I arrived. Melissa was animated and charming with everyone else. My son looked exhausted. The grandchildren raced through the house. Holiday music played softly in the background. I settled into my usual role. Observe, smile. Be pleasant. At dinner, the conversation drifted toward money, not directly at first. Someone mentioned real estate, then investments, then business acquisitions. Melissa enjoyed those discussions. She spoke confidently about entrepreneurs, valuation multiples, and market trends. Several people listened attentively. I mostly focused on my meal. At one point, my nephew asked whether selling a company was always the smartest move. I laughed quietly. Not always. He looked at me. Why not? I shrugged. Sometimes the offer isn't worth what you're giving up. Easy to say, Melissa replied with a smile. Most people would take the money, probably. What kind of offer would someone turn down? I took a sip of water. Oh, I don't know. 340 million, maybe. The room became still, not dramatically. Just suddenly, Forks paused. Someone blinked. My son stared at me. Melissa actually laughed. She thought I was joking, then she realized I wasn't. What? I looked up. A few years ago, we received an acquisition proposal. Nobody spoke. I continued eating. The silence stretched longer than I expected. Finally, my nephew said, "You turned down $340 million? It wasn't entirely my decision. There were other stakeholders." Melissa's smile had disappeared. Wait, what company are we talking about? I told her. Recognition spread around the table in stages. My son closed his eyes. You never told them? I looked genuinely confused. I thought everyone knew. Nobody knew, at least not really. They knew I worked. They knew I traveled. They knew I attended meetings. Apparently, they had never been curious enough to ask what any of it actually meant. Questions arrived from every direction. When, how? Why decline? What happened afterward? I answered politely but briefly. The attention felt strange. 9 years of near invisibility had not prepared me for sudden interest. Then the evening took a turn I couldn't have anticipated. My phone rang. Normally, I would have ignored it, but I recognized the name immediately. I stepped away from the table and answered. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. When I returned, Melissa asked, "Was that business related?" "More or less." Before I could say anything else, the front door opened. A man entered carrying a small package. Everyone recognized him from television interviews and business magazines. He was one of the company's current executive partners and happened to be in town for meetings. He had stopped by because we had discussed some documents earlier that week. The package simply needed my signature. Nothing important, to me. Anyway, the moment he saw me, he smiled. There you are. He crossed the room immediately, not toward my son, not toward anyone else. Toward me, the conversation that followed lasted perhaps 5 minutes. He updated me on negotiations. Asked for my opinion regarding a pending decision, mentioned a board vote scheduled after the holidays. Then he thanked me for advice I'd given him months earlier. The entire exchange was casual, routine, professional. But something in the room shifted not because of what he said, because of how naturally he treated me as someone whose judgment mattered. When he left, nobody spoke for several seconds. The authority of the moment required no explanation. For years, my family had viewed me through assumptions. In 5 minutes, those assumptions collapsed. The rest of dinner felt different. Melissa asked questions, lots of questions. She laughed at my stories. She sat closer. She listened. Anyone observing might have called it progress. I found it heartbreaking, not because she was rude, because she was kind, far kinder than before. And I couldn't stop wondering why. The answer sat plainly between us. Nothing about me had changed. The only new information was the scale of my success. That realization stayed with me long after dessert. A few days later, Melissa called. Just to talk. The conversation was pleasant, genuine, even. At one point, she admitted something. "I don't think I ever understood who you were." I appreciated her honesty, but I couldn't completely ignore the timing. For 9 years, understanding had been available. Curiosity had been available. Questions had been available. Only interest had been missing. Today, our relationship is better than it was before. We speak more often. There is more respect, more effort, more acknowledgement. I am grateful for that. But Christmas taught me something uncomfortable. Being ignored hurts. Being suddenly valued because people discover your wealth hurts differently. One wound questions your importance. The other questions their sincerity. I left that holiday dinner with something I hadn't had before: respect, undeniable respect. What I didn't leave with was certainty. Because once people reveal what captures their attention, it's difficult to forget how long they looked away before they finally decided to see you.